I never thought there'd come a day when my own son would clap his hands and cheer while his wife smashed a plate in front of me and screamed, "You don't have the right to sit at this table." But that night, the plate wasn't the only thing that shattered. My dignity, the dignity of a woman who spent her whole life sacrificing for her family, broke right alongside those pieces of porcelain scattered across that cold, hard floor. Marcus, the little boy who used to cling to me every time thunder shook the sky, stood there looking at me like I was a stranger. And Ayana, she looked at me like I was something ugly, something she wished didn't exist. In the very apartment I helped them buy by selling the home I'd lived in for 30 years. I believed love, family, and sacrifice could fix anything. But the biggest mistake of my life was believing I was still family in their eyes. And this is the story of how a mother was pushed all the way to the bottom, then rose from that bottom not to get revenge, but to reclaim the life they tried their hardest to grind into dust. Are you ready to hear it all? Because this isn't a soft story. This is the truth of a woman who was pushed to her final limit. That afternoon, the last bit of sunlight cut sideways through the big glass window of the apartment, washing the dining room in a soft golden glow. But for me, there was nothing peaceful about that moment. Not even that beautiful light could soften the scene unfolding in front of me. The white porcelain plate sitting in front of me was snatched up and slammed hard against the marble floor. The crack rang out like an accusation. "Why you think you can sit at this table without asking?" Ayana's voice, my daughter-in-law. "I've been trying to love for the past 3 years," came sharp and cold, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I stared at my food, black bean stew I cooked myself, splattered across the floor, staining the hem of my pants. The familiar smell one I'd carried through hundreds of quiet dinners now felt more like a mark of humiliation than a meal. Before I could even breathe, Marcus, my only son, the boy I raised with my whole life, burst out laughing and clapped his hands like he was watching a show. "That's right, baby. She needs to learn her place." Every word from his mouth cut straight into me like a cold blade, not because he yelled, but because he chose her, this woman who treated me like dead weight over me, the woman who carried him, raised him, protected him. In that split second, something in my chest cracked. Not bones, but my spirit, my pride. The last bit of dignity I'd been holding onto these past months shattered just like that plate lying in sharp pieces at my feet. And I knew this moment would haunt me. Ayana straightened up, arms folded, eyes full of contempt, like I was some intruder in her home. "You don't do anything in this house unless I say so. You understand this house." Those two words scraped at my ears. I was the one who paid for this apartment. I was the one who sold the home I lived in for over 30 years just so my son could have a stable life. And now I didn't have the right to sit at a table I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because my throat tightened. The shame was so heavy, I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd break down right there. Something I'd been fighting every day since moving in. Marcus spoke again, softer this time, but somehow crueler than any shout. "Mom, don't start anything. Ayana just wants the house to run right." Run right. A pretty word they used to cover the ugliness. I remembered when Marcus was 5, standing on the porch of our old house crying because the neighbor's dog ripped his favorite teddy bear. I held him then, rocking him like the whole world was falling apart. And now he looked at me like I was some stranger messing up his evening. I bent down to pick up the broken pieces, not wanting anyone to get hurt, but Ayana scoffed. "Leave it. What can you even clean? Let the staff handle it." Staff. I wasn't a staff, I wasn't a guest, but clearly in their eyes, I wasn't family either. When I looked up, Marcus wouldn't even meet my eyes. He pretended to stay cold, but I saw it annoyance, like I'd ruined something for them. Years ago, I would have found an excuse for him. Work stress, influence from his wife. But today, nothing could soften what he had done. I stood slowly, steadying my voice. I just wanted to eat with my family. Marcus sighed like I was a problem he was tired of dealing with. "We talked about this. Mom, your schedule throws us off." Ayana cut in, each word deliberate. "You can eat in the kitchen. That's the right place for you." A chill spread through my chest. When Marcus was little, he used to climb into my lap during dinner because he was scared of the dark. I'd cut his food, feed him gently, sing the lullabies my mama sang to me. And now, he wouldn't let me sit at the same table. I swallowed the hurt and walked toward the kitchen, leaving behind their half mocking, half amused laughter. As I stepped away, Ayana muttered loud enough for me to hear, "I don't know why mothers in law love to make a fuss. She ain't a child." Marcus answered with a short laugh. I held onto the edge of the counter, pulling in a deep breath to keep the tears back. The smell of black bean stew still clung to my clothes, but it no longer felt warm. It felt like part of the wound I had to swallow. Memories began rising. I saw myself 40 plus years ago, a young black woman with soft curls and bright laughter living on the south side of Chicago. I married Samuel, kind, hardworking, not always thoughtful, but never cruel. We weren't rich, but we were enough. When Marcus was born, I left my office job to stay home with him. Nobody asked me to. I just wanted him to grow up wrapped in love. I didn't know unconditional sacrifice can make people think it's your duty to give everything. When Samuel died suddenly from a stroke, I stood alone in that quiet house full of memories but empty in every way that mattered. Marcus was married by then. He came to the funeral, then left a few hours later because Ayana wasn't feeling well. For weeks, I waited for a call, a message, anything. Nothing came. Silence became my only companion. Dinner for one, TV for one, bed for one. No warmth, no voices, just the sound of my own breathing. I remember standing at the sink, staring at a single lonely plate, thinking my whole life just shrunk down to this. In those lonely months, I used to wish Marcus needed me, that I had something, anything big enough to bring him back into my life. And that's what pushed me to sell the home I'd lived in for 20 years, believing money could rebuild a bridge made of love. Yet here I was on the floor of the apartment I helped pay for, watching my son take the side of a woman who never hid her contempt for me. I glanced toward the dining room. Marcus wrapped an arm around Ayana. They laughed, cleaned up together, looked like a perfect little family, except for one thing: I didn't belong in that picture. My heart felt heavy. But somewhere beneath the shame, something small stirred, tiny as dust in the air. Fragile, but real. It was the first flicker of self-respect, something I thought I'd lost after years of living for others. I didn't know what was waiting for me. I didn't know that this humiliation was just the beginning of a storm rising inside me. But I knew one thing for certain: I would remember this night for the rest of my life. Ayana's sneer, Marcus's clap, the plate shattering on the floor. I would remember it all, so that one day every piece of this pain would be returned, one by one, too. After that humiliating night, I went back to my room, the one Ayana always called the storage space, and sat on the edge of the bed. The ceiling light poured its cold glow across the floor, and inside my chest something smoldered like hot coal. Not anger, a hurt so deep it made silence feel heavy. I looked down at my hands, line worn, familiar. The same hands that soothed Marcus all through his childhood. The hands that carried him through those nights of high fever. The hands that combed his hair before every first day of school. And now those same hands belonged to a woman he treated like an inconvenience. I leaned back, letting my head sink into the old pillow, closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The image of that shattered plate kept flashing in my mind, along with the one question clinging to me like a shadow: how did I let myself end up like this? The answer pulled me back to the days after Samuel died, my husband, my partner of almost 4 decades. The night the doctor said he didn't make it, it felt like somebody had ripped a piece of my body away. Samuel wasn't a perfect man. He was quiet, worked himself to the bone sometimes, so absent-minded I had to remind myself he loved me. But we had weathered everything together: poverty storms, discrimination, sickness, and above all, he always kept a small space for me in his life. I never imagined the day he'd leave would come so suddenly. The funeral home was full of white flowers that day, but Ayana never showed up. Marcus said she had a headache. I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength. Samuel lay there still and far away, and Marcus leaned against the wall, checking his phone every few minutes. He left 2 hours later, leaving me alone with a grief bigger than any empty room in that house. After that, my life faded into a gray blur. The rooms that once felt familiar suddenly felt too big, too quiet. I still cooked dinner for two out of habit, then sat there eating by myself. I folded Samuel's clothes the way he liked and stared at the blank space where he used to place his old fedora. The whole world shrank down to the tick of the living room clock and the wind slipping past the window pane. I tried calling Marcus a few times, always voicemail. I'd leave a message, then sit there waiting for the phone to ring, like a child waiting for her mama after school. But it never did. I kept telling myself he's busy. Work is stressful. His wife needs him. But the more weeks passed in silence, the harder that excuse was to believe. One evening, holding a cup of cold tea in the kitchen, a heavy truth settled inside me. Like lead, I was completely alone. No parents, no siblings, friends scattered miles away. And the one child I had, the boy I used to cradle through feverish nights, was now giving his attention to everyone except me. The loneliness kept me awake for nights. I'd stand in front of the mirror and see a brown skinned woman who had spent too many years taking care of everybody else until she forgot how to take care of herself. I saw the wrinkles, the tired eyes, but the scariest thing I saw was invisibility. I had become a shadow in my own life. Then one night I sat in the living room staring at a family picture taken 20 years ago. Marcus stood in the middle, smiling wide, with that little gap where his baby teeth used to be holding both my hand and Samuel's. I stared at that smile and asked myself, where did it go? When did it disappear? That's when the tears came for the first time in months. I cried not just for Samuel, but for a belief I'd carried my whole life. That love, when given enough, would always be returned. That if I sacrificed enough, my family would never abandon me. But I'd been wrong. The next morning in that silent house, where even the ticking clock felt loud, a thought came to me, small, fragile, but powerful. If I had something of value, Marcus would come back. The thought was painful, pathetic even. But it was the only thing I had left to hold on to. I wanted my son to need me. I wanted him to remember I still existed. And from that thought, a decision was born, one that dragged my whole life toward the edge of a cliff. I would sell the house Samuel and I spent nearly our whole youth paying off. I would gather all the money, hand it to Marcus, and the three of us would live together in a bigger, nicer apartment somewhere I could feel like part of his family again. When I called and told Marcus my plan, his voice changed. For the first time in months, it sounded warm. Mom, really? You'd do that for us? I heard Ayana say something in the background, her voice bright, excited, like she'd just hit the jackpot. Marcus came back on the line. Mom, thank you. This means so much to us. And I believed him. I believed I was doing the right thing. So I signed the papers without hesitation, packed every belonging, every memory, every piece of the life Samuel and I built into cardboard boxes. When I left that house, I pressed my hand to the door one last time and whispered, Samuel, if you can hear me, please understand. I'm just trying to keep our family from falling apart. I didn't know I was leaving the home that sheltered me for years, just to walk straight into the biggest storm of my life, a storm named Marcus and Ayana, and in that storm I wasn't someone to be loved. I was the easiest one to destroy. 3, I started the process of selling my house quietly, the same way I'd lived most of my life, not bothering anyone, not talking too much, not letting my feelings become a burden to the people around me. But this wasn't like any move I had ever made. It wasn't just packing up furniture. It felt like I was peeling my life apart piece by piece, lifting away the memories Samuel and I had built over 30 some years of marriage. Brown cardboard boxes filled the living room. I sat in the middle of them, holding faded photo albums, tiny decorations Samuel and I once argued over for half a day, just trying to decide which shelf they belonged on. I found the old red apron he used to tease me about too bright. He'd say, yet he'd still slip it on every evening when he helped me cook. Those little things that should have weighed nothing, suddenly felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. Over and over, I froze with my hand on the edge of a box, not knowing whether to pack something or leave it. The house was full, but I knew I couldn't bring it all. Marcus and Ayana certainly didn't want the new place cluttered with outdated stuff like Ayana once called it. So I made choices, each one cutting at me like tearing off a piece of my life I wasn't ready to let go of. That evening, when I placed Samuel's old shirt into the last box, something tightened hard around my throat. I pressed the fabric to my face, the scent of old wood and soap rising up like he was right beside me. For a moment, I swear I could touch him. I don't know how long I held that shirt. But when I finally looked up, the sky outside had already gone dark. Samuel, I whispered, my voice thin as mist, if you're watching, please understand. I'm just trying to hold on to what's left of our family. I told myself that even while my heart whispered, I was making a terrible mistake. The next morning, when I looked in the mirror, I looked older, not from age, but from knowing I was about to leave the place I thought would be the last home I'd ever have. The realtor came by to assess the house, walking through each room with a cold, businesslike gaze. He didn't see Samuel in the scratches on the hardwood floor where he used to drag his chair. He didn't hear Marcus's childhood laughter bouncing behind the old sofa. He didn't feel the quiet nights Samuel and I sat watching the news together, not saying much, but knowing we were safe. To him, it was just another property. To me, it was the only place that ever called me wife, mama, family. And yet, I signed it away in minutes. When I put pen to paper, my hand didn't feel like it belonged to me. It trembled, but I forced myself to stay steady. I'm doing this for Marcus, I told myself. For his future, for our family. My shaky letters crawled across that cold page. And when the last stroke landed, I knew a chapter longer than I ever meant it to be had closed for good. I called Marcus right after. He sounded almost giddy, younger than he had in months. For real, Mom. The house sold, yeah, baby. It's done. Man, that means we can finally look for something bigger. You did good, Mom. I'll take you house hunting this weekend. I could hear Ayana in the background, more excited than even Marcus was. I smiled weakly. Maybe now. They would finally treat me like real family. I didn't know my little hope was nothing more than a dim oil lamp flickering in front of a storm. That weekend, they took me out to look at apartments. I sat in the back seat staring out the window as Chicago sped past, sharp, fast, unforgiving. I grew up on the South Side where neighbors knew each other, where grocery store cashiers asked how your mama was doing. The city now felt like a stranger, and I didn't know where I belonged anymore. The first apartment was in a new midtown building. Polished floors, polite security guards, bright elevators. Ayana walked in like she owned the whole place. She opened cabinets without asking, ran her fingers along the counters, tested every appliance like she was the one paying for it. Marcus looked around wide-eyed, imagining a future I'd never even been invited into. And me, I stood near the door, careful not to be in the way, careful not to want too much. When the agent mentioned the price, Ayana squeezed Marcus's hand. Perfect. We have to buy this one. Then she turned to me with a smile too sweet to trust. What do you think, Mom? Nice, right? I swallowed the pressure rising in my throat. If y'all like it, then I like it. I didn't realize I just sentenced myself with that one soft answer. We looked at more places after that. Ayana didn't like one because the kitchen was small, another because the light was weird, another because the energy felt off. Every time, my opinion disappeared like smoke, as if I wasn't even standing there. In the end, we circled back to the first Midtown unit. Ayana grinned. This is our new home. The word R landed in my chest like a blade, but I forced a smile. Family matters more than my feelings, I told myself. We went to a law office on the 13th floor to sign the contract. Tall windows, old building, rows of tight little streets outside. The attorney was a middle-aged, brown-skinned man named Watson, his voice steady and low. When he read the ownership names aloud, I heard them clearly. Marcus Taylor and Ayana Brooks. I blinked. And my name? Before I could finish, Ayana slid in smoothly, her voice sweet but sharp. Oh, Mom, you're older now. Paperwork is so complicated. It's just easier if we put it under our names. Marcus gave that soft smile that always melted me. Mom, don't worry. It's our home. Names don't matter. Watson froze mid-sentence. He looked straight at me. Mrs. Taylor, are you sure if you sign this you will have no legal ownership of the property? The room went silent. Ayana held her breath, not for me, but because she didn't want the deal slowed down. Marcus didn't even ask if I was okay. He just said gently, like a lullaby meant to blindfold me, Mom, we're family. Family. Those two words hit the softest, weakest part of me. I signed like a mother desperate not to lose the last piece of her child. My handwriting trembled and stretched across the page, just like the years that were waiting for me after this. Watson watched me for a long time, then said quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. I didn't, not at all. We left the office, and Ayana laughed the whole way down the elevator. Marcus talked about our bright future family dinners, all the things we'd finally do together. And me, I stared down at my hands and wondered, was this the price of love? A price so high? And one I didn't even realize I'd paid until it was far, far too late. 4. The new apartment Marcus and Ayana proudly called our future home never felt like home to me. Sure, it was fancy, shiny floors, warm gold, lights, that strong smell of fresh wood everywhere. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel it. I didn't belong there. When the movers brought everything in, Ayana immediately pointed them toward her furniture, her big designer sofa, her abstract paintings, her glass top tables. The living room transformed into her space within minutes. My things, just two little boxes, pushed up against the wall like items someone planned to donate later. Marcus said, Mom, which room you want? But he wasn't even looking at me. Ayana answered for him, the small one at the end of the hall. That's better for her. Her? Not Mom. Not your mother. Just her. That little room barely fit a narrow bed. And the old wooden dresser I dragged from my old house? No window. Just a stiff air vent, humming like a broken engine. When I stepped inside, the chill from the concrete walls seeped straight through my skin. But I forced a smile. It's fine. I can stay here because some part of me still believed that if I stayed long enough, lived gently enough, loved quietly enough, they'd understand how hard I was trying. But hope is like steam one cold wind and it disappears. The first morning in the apartment, I got up early to make breakfast. Coffee, toast, eggs, things I'd made my whole life. Ayana walked in and her face tightened like I'd dirtied her kitchen. She grabbed the coffee pot, glanced at the cup I'd poured, then poured the whole thing down the sink. I like things modern. Your coffee is too strong, too bitter, too old-fashioned. My mouth fell open not because she insulted my coffee, but because she said it like my age was something embarrassing. Marcus walked in then. I prayed he'd say something, anything to soften the blow, but he just shrugged. Ayana likes making breakfast herself. Mom just let her handle it. His words didn't hurt as much as his eyes avoiding mine, like he didn't want to feel connected to me anymore. And things only got worse after that. Every time I touched something in the kitchen, Ayana snapped, don't mess things up. Just leave it. I'd mop the floor. You're making streaks. Fold laundry. You're folding it wrong. Buy groceries. You spend money on useless things. I started shrinking, walking softer, eating only when they left the house, moving like a thief in the place I paid for. At dinner, Ayana set the table beautifully. When I tried to sit down, she shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. Your meals are in the kitchen. We want to eat alone. I tried to smile. I think it came out crooked. I took my simple plate back into the kitchen and ate standing up, facing a blank white wall. From the dining room, their laughter spilled out like a cruel soundtrack, loud, warm, and meant for each other, not me. Then I heard Marcus say Ayana's cooking so good. I'm lucky. The dish she made was the same recipe I taught him when he was 7, but I stayed silent. Silence had become the coat I wore every day. One afternoon, I bought fruit and bread on sale. When I stepped through the door, Ayana blocked my path. This house has enough food. Why do you keep buying useless things? I just thought whatever you think is wrong. I froze. I'd never been spoken to like that in my life, not even by strangers. Marcus watched it happen. Instead of defending me, he said, Ayana's right. Stop buying things, Mom. Right then, I knew I was extra. In the very home I had emptied my entire life savings to buy, I was the extra piece nobody wanted. I went back to my small room and sat on the bed, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I asked myself, where did I go wrong? How did loving my child bring me here? No answer came, only the whine of that cold air vent sounding like someone crying from far away. A week later, Ayana hosted a small gathering. I stayed in my room as usual. But when a guest accidentally knocked on my door looking for the bathroom, I opened it, and Ayana rushed over, grabbing her guest by the arm. "Oh, don't go in there. That's just a storage room for old things." I stood there frozen. Old things. So that's what I was to her. That night, I heard her snapping at Marcus. "I'm tired of having your mother here. I can't live with someone who's like a shadow in my own house." Marcus said nothing. And sometimes silence is the hardest slap of all. I began avoiding them completely, eating in secret, doing laundry only when Ayana was out, walking through the hall like my footsteps didn't deserve to exist. I was disappearing in the very home my money built. But it didn't stop there. One morning I was doing laundry when Ayana came home early. She saw the machine running, yanked the door open so hard water splashed everywhere, and tossed my wet clothes onto the cold tile floor. "I need to wash. You can wait." It was halfway. "Don't care." I bent down, picking up my clothes, my hands trembling. Ayana watched me with a satisfied little smile, the smile of someone who wanted to prove she had power over me. And that was the moment I understood. She didn't just want me out of the way, she wanted me gone. And the only person who could protect me, my son, was slipping further and further from me every day. Each day I felt myself shrinking more, becoming so small I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Me, a woman who once chased dreams, survived a marriage full of storms, raised a child through poverty, was now nothing but a trembling shadow in a windowless room. But here's something Ayana didn't know. My silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's a storm waiting for the right moment to break. And just when it looked like I had nothing left, when Ayana pushed me one step too far, I stood up. Not as the weak one, but as a woman who had finally had enough. If you've ever seen injustice inside a family, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still here with me. 5. After weeks of living in silence, on edge, feeling like some faint shadow shoved into a corner, no one cared to notice, I started to feel my body getting lighter, but not in a good way. It was the kind of lightness that comes when a person's being worn down so thin, they barely feel real anymore. I moved through that apartment like a breathing ghost, but without any real life inside me. My eyes were sunken, my face hollow, my shoulders slumped like I'd somehow ended up carrying the weight of the whole place on my back. One evening, I heard Marcus and Ayana arguing in the living room. I hadn't meant to listen, but my door was cracked and her voice cut through the air, sharp as a knife tearing into raw flesh. "I'm done. I can't take this anymore. She's just lurking around the house like some shadow. I feel suffocated." Marcus sighed. "Ayana, she's just trying to fit in, fit in." "And what about us? Don't we get to have our own life? How long are you planning on keeping her here? A year, two? Or till she dies?" I shut my eyes and bit my lip until I tasted blood. "Till she dies." She said it like my old age was some burden they couldn't get rid of fast enough. Then Ayana kept going this time and not even trying to hide what she wanted. "I already found a cheap nursing home. They have a room open. She has her monthly benefits. She can pay for herself." Putting her there is the most reasonable thing to do. It felt like somebody kicked me straight in the gut. A nursing home, no concern, no softness. Not even one single question about what I wanted. Marcus was quiet for a long time. I heard his footsteps pacing like he was wrestling with guilt and selfishness going back and forth. Then his voice came low but sharp enough to slice me open. "If that's what it takes for this house to be peaceful, then we'll do it." My hands dug into the edge of the bed, my breath catching in my chest. Not from anger, but from a hurt. So deep it felt like it reached the bone. My only child, as had just agreed to throw me away. I didn't cry. Maybe because I'd used up all my tears in those long, lonely months before. I just sat there stiff as carved wood, staring at nothing, wondering how a mother who loved that hard that blindly could end up being treated this cold. The next morning, I waited until Ayana and Marcus left for work before I stepped out of my room. I walked toward the living room, each step heavy, like I was wading through deep water. The apartment was flooded with sunlight, but all I felt inside was darkness. I looked around at all of those expensive things they'd bought, all the things my money helped pay for, and asked myself how my life had come to such a bitter ending. Then my hand brushed against something on the shelf, my old wallet. I opened it and saw the cream colored business card I'd left there weeks ago, Attorney John Watson, the same lawyer who had warned me before I signed those papers. When my eyes landed on his name, my heart thumped a little faster, like someone just struck a match in a room that had been dark too long. A small flame, but just enough to show me this might not be the dead end I thought it was. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone, not from fear, from being out of practice standing up for myself. I took a deep breath and dialed. The phone rang 3 times before that low, steady voice rolled through the speaker. "This is Attorney Watson." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. All the hurt balled up in my throat and came out as shaky breathing. "Mrs. Taylor, is that you?" I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. "Yes, it's me. I need help." He didn't pry, didn't rush me, didn't act annoyed. He just said, "Take your time. Tell me what's been happening." So I did. I told him everything, every mocking word from Ayana, every cold glance from Marcus, every dinner I had to eat standing alone in the kitchen, every sleepless night, every piece of soaking wet laundry thrown on the floor, every breath I took that felt like I was borrowing air in a house I helped pay for. I talked until my voice went rough and dry. Watson didn't interrupt. Every now and then, I just heard him sigh heavy, like he was swallowing his anger on my behalf. When I finally finished, the room went so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Then he said something I almost couldn't believe. "It's a good thing you called me, because I never filed the first set of documents." My brows drew together. What do you mean?" His voice dropped lower, careful, like he was easing me into a truth that might shake me. "I prepared a second set of papers in case you ever change your mind. In this version, the apartment is registered the way it should have been from the start with you as the owner." My heart skipped. "I own the apartment." "That's right. There's a detail in the original contract Marcus and Ayana don't know about. The version they signed isn't legally complete. If you sign this file and I process it correctly, the property will belong to you." I put my hand over my chest, feeling stunned and overwhelmed all at once. "Why? Why would you do that for me?" Watson let out a short, sad chuckle. When he spoke again, his voice was tight. "Because I've seen too many people like you. People who give everything to their families only to be treated like they're disposable. My conscience wouldn't let me leave you unprotected." I bit my lip as tears slid down onto the hand holding the phone. But this time they weren't tears of helplessness. They burned. Tears from someone who's finally starting to stand up after being pushed down too long. Watson continued, "If you want to go through with this, come to my office this afternoon. And don't tell anyone." I agreed, without hesitation. That afternoon, I pulled on my old sweater and took the bus to his office. Chicago's winter wind cut straight through my clothes, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was walking towards something that belonged to me, a decision that was mine to make. I wasn't trembling anymore. I climbed each stair slowly, then stopped in front of Watson's office door, feeling like a different woman. Not just a mother being cornered, but a woman fighting to reclaim something she'd lost long ago, her right to live without being disrespected. Watson greeted me with a serious but warm look. He laid a fresh stack of documents on the desk in front of me. On the very first page, in clear bold letters, it read, "Owner Evelyn Taylor." Those words cut through the fog in my life like sunlight. I picked up the pen. This time my hand did not shake. I signed page after page, line after line, like I was stitching myself back together after being torn apart. When I finished the last signature, I set the pen down and exhaled a breath that felt lighter, but stronger. Watson tucked the papers away carefully and said, "You did the right thing. Let me handle the rest." I bowed my head in thanks. Then I walked out of that office and stepped back into the crowded street, feeling something rise inside me, something fierce and alive. For the first time in months of living in the shadows, I felt like I was stepping into the light. Not a light someone handed me, but one I fought for. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how Marcus and Ayana will react when the truth comes out. But I know this much. Evelyn Taylor, will never again let anyone decide the value of my life for me. Not ever. 6. A week after I signed the new papers with attorney Watson, something in me shifted. I no longer shook when Ayanna yelled. I no longer lowered my head when Marcus shot me that irritated look. The silence I carried, the same silence that once meant surrender, now felt like a calm lake hiding the storm building underneath. Every morning I woke up holding a secret heavy as lead. But somehow that weight made me stand taller, made me walk steadier, like I was carrying a shield they didn't even know existed. Ayanna noticed it first. One morning she caught me in the kitchen and stared like she was studying a crime scene. "You seem different," she said, suspicion dripping from every word. "Something going on." I set my teacup down gently, smiled, just a little. "Different how?" She squinted, looking for a crack in my face, something she could use. "You look way too happy." Then she flipped her hair, strutted out of the kitchen, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and a frustration she didn't understand. I watched her go, my heart quiet as still water. She had no idea I was getting ready to deliver the final blow. And the fact she didn't know, that alone made her nervous. Marcus felt it too, just later than she did. One evening, he walked in to see me sitting in the living room, reading a place I'd rarely dared to be before. He blinked. "Mama, you're not in your room." I looked up from my books, smiling softly. "What for? This is a big house." He nodded, confused, but didn't ask more. He'd never asked enough to truly understand me anyway. Then came the day Ayanna thought she'd finally won. She planted herself in my doorway, arms crossed, voice sweet as syrup, but cold enough to frost glass. "Evelyn, I want to tell you now so you won't be shocked. In 2 weeks, you'll be moving into a nursing home out in the suburbs. I already reserved a room." I looked up at her calm, silent, not broken the way she expected. No begging, no crying, no falling apart, just quiet. "You're not going to say anything?" she snapped. "I understand," I said simply. That answer struck her like a slap she didn't see coming. She wanted me to crumble, to collapse, to plead. But I stood there like she'd read me the weather report. That night, I sat for a long time, staring at Attorney Watson's business card. Tomorrow would be the end, not for me, but for the cruelty they'd built their lives on. I closed my eyes and slept deeper than I had in months, sleeping like someone who no longer feared the dark.
Maximum.
The night everything changed was during a little party Ayanna threw to show off her perfect life. Laughter spilled through the apartment, glasses clinked. Ayanna bragged loudly. "Everything here is top-tier furniture space, lighting, everything." Not one word about how my money paid for it all. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I put on a deep blue dress I'd kept for years, clipped a faded silver barrette into my hair. My eyes were still tired, but brighter than they'd been in months. Not because of makeup, because I finally remembered who I was. When I stepped out of my room, the whole apartment seemed to pause. Conversations froze. Glances turned toward me like I was a stranger wondering where she didn't belong. Ayanna spun around. Her smile vanished instantly. "What are you doing out here?" she hissed. I said nothing. I walked straight to the dining table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. The sound of that chair scraping the floor sliced the room open. Ayanna snapped, "Get up! This isn't your place." Marcus jumped in. "Mama, don't make a scene in front of people." I placed my hand on the table, met their eyes, truly looked at them for the first time in months. "I live in this home. I sit wherever I choose." Ayanna's face flushed, her hands trembling with rage. "You..." Before she finished, she slapped the plate in front of me off the table. It shattered across the floor, food everywhere. Marcus let out a low laugh. "Well, now you know your place." But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't back away. I rose to my feet, reached into my coat pocket, and placed a thick folder right onto the table, like setting the final piece on a long, long game of chess. "I have one question for everyone here," I said, my voice calm enough to scare even me. "Who here thinks this apartment belongs to Marcus and Ayanna?" Ayanna answered instantly. "Of course it does. You signed the papers willingly." I opened the folder, turned the document so everyone could see. "Well, That's no longer true. Ayana snatched the stack, flipping through pages fast. I watched her face go from red to gray to white. Marcus grabbed the papers, reading harder than I'd ever seen him read anything in his life. Then he looked at me with a fear I had never seen before. What is this, Mama? This says the house is in your name. That's right, I said, my voice soft as breath. I signed a corrected set of documents. The attorney filed them. Everything is legal. Everything is done. Silence swallowed the room, heavy, thick, almost holy. Ayana burst into tears, shocked, furious, humiliated. She lunged toward me, trembling like an animal, cornered. Marcus had to hold her back. Their friend slipped out quietly, too embarrassed to stay another second. When the door shut, it was just the three of us. Marcus looking like he'd just woken from a very long, very stupid dream. Ayana shaking smudged mascara, grasping for any last bit of control. You can't do this, she stuttered. You can't kick us out. I straightened my back, feeling strength pulse through every inch of me. Yes, I said softly, I can, because this is my home. No yelling, no rage, just truth sharp enough to end every last ounce of their tyranny. After months of living like I didn't exist, I finally got my voice back. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw something new in Ayana and Marcus. Fear. Not because I was dangerous, but because I was no longer afraid of them. 7. The air inside that apartment after the truth came out was so heavy it felt like every breath tasted like metal. Ayana stood frozen, her fists clenched so tight it looked like she was trying to crush something invisible in her hands. Marcus looked drained, like somebody had taken all the blood out of his face, staring at the ownership papers on the table. The apartment he'd called his new home now legally belonged to the woman he'd been mistreating for months. And me, after all those months of being treated like clutter, something to step around. For the first time, I stood in that apartment without feeling small or extra. I stood straight. My back didn't bend, my voice didn't shake. Ayana was the first one to crack. She took a step toward me like someone who'd just had their weapon snatched away. No, no, this can't be real, she stammered, her voice breaking apart. This can't be true. I answered quietly but firm as stone. I told you. This is my home. I could see the fury in her eyes. It wasn't just about losing the apartment, it was about losing control. Losing the right she thought she had to dictate where I stood, how I lived when I breathed. That's what made her rage burn so wild. Marcus, still dazed, turned to me. Mama, when did you do this? Where did this lawyer even come from? Why didn't you tell me? I looked him dead in the eye, the same eyes that once sparkled when he was a little boy racing around the backyard. You never asked, I said softly, and I had no reason to explain myself to people who no longer see me as family. His head dropped like every word I spoke landed in his chest like stones. But Ayana wasn't done. She snatched the papers off the table, flung the pages open, flipping through like she could will the ink to disappear. Every page had my signature. Every page had a seal. Every page had my name exactly where she thought it would never be. Panic twisted her anger into something even uglier. This old woman thinks she is who she spat. How the hell did you steal this apartment back, Marcus? Don't just stand there. Say something. Marcus stuttered, his mouth moving, but no real words coming out. He looked at me, then at her, then back at the papers. For the first time in months, he looked like a lost child with nowhere to stand. Before he could find his voice, Ayana threw the stack of papers back onto the table and screamed, No, 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 no. She can't do this. She can't just throw us out on the street. And then, like a door slamming open in a storm, something snapped in her. She grabbed a glass off the table, her fingers squeezing so hard her knuckles turned white. She marched up to me, her breath hot with rage. If you don't get out of my house, she hissed, I'll make sure you regret it. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Because I could see it. She wasn't in control anymore. Ayana shoved my shoulder hard. I stumbled back a step. Stop, Ayana, Marcus shouted. Enough. But she wasn't hearing him. Her eyes were blazing in that wild way people get when they're cornered. She lunged again, harder this time, her hands pressing into my shoulder like she was trying to shove me right out of her world. I felt the floor tilt under me. For one short second, I knew I'd lost my balance. Everything after that happened in slow, quiet pieces. My breath catching my foot, sliding on the polished floor. Marcus yelling my name from somewhere far away. Then my body hit the cold tile. There was a crack sharp and deep like dry wood snapping in winter. Fire exploded through my hip. I couldn't move. Every breath felt trapped halfway in my chest. When I tried to shift, pain shot from my hip down my leg like someone had poured liquid fire into my bones. Ayana staggered back, her face drained of color, her hands shaking. Marcus dropped to his knees beside me, panic written all over his face. Oh my God, Mama, can you hear me? His voice shook thin and scared. I tried to breathe. Each inhale felt like a needle digging into my bones. I looked up at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw it. He realized something, something he should have seen a long time ago. But I couldn't say anything. The pain locked my tongue in place. Ayana started backing away, muttering, No, no, it wasn't my fault. She just fell? Marcus shouted, Ayana, you pushed her. I saw you. She froze. Her eyes flew open wide. You're really gonna say that? You picking her over me now? Marcus's chest heaved. His mouth opened and closed, but no lie would come out this time. He couldn't cover for her anymore. Not after this. I tried to move again, but the pain was too sharp. Tears spilled out of my eyes, even though I wasn't trying to cry. Marcus grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice breaking as he tried to explain what happened. I heard the dispatcher's voice faintly through the speaker, but it sounded warped like it was echoing from the bottom of a well. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the siren. Ayana kept retreating farther into the living room, clutching her head, whispering over and over, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. When the paramedics came in, they knelt beside me, checking my hip, placing an oxygen mask near my face. Looks like a hip fracture, one of them said. We need to move her now. They lifted me carefully onto the stretcher. Even with their gentlest touch, pain tore through me so sharp I had to clench my jaw to keep from screaming. As they rolled me toward the door, I caught one last look at Marcus. His face was twisted with guilt, fear, and something like shame. He squeezed my hand so hard it shook, and I lifted my free hand just a little to touch his, to let him know I'm still here. Even if everything else was broken. The police kept Ayana back for questioning. I heard one officer say, Ma'am, you're going to have to come with us. This is an assault causing bodily harm. Ayana glanced at me then. No more smugness, no more contempt, just fear, the cold kind that comes when you realize you've finally gone too far. They loaded me into the ambulance. Marcus climbed in beside me, sitting close eyes red, like he wanted to say 1,000 things and had no idea where to start. My body burned with pain, but my mind felt strangely clear. For the first time, I didn't feel like some helpless victim being cornered. I felt like someone in a fight for her life, and finally the truth was standing on my side. As the ambulance pulled away, I closed my eyes, not to escape, but because I understood something. The moment Ayana shoved me to the floor, my life turned a page. From that second on, I would never again be the woman who tiptoed around her own home. My hip might be broken, but my spirit, it wasn't. I wasn't shattered. I was just getting started. 8, inside the ambulance, the siren wailed again and again, tearing through the air, but to me, every sound felt far away. The only thing I could feel clearly was Marcus's trembling hand wrapped around mine, holding on like he was afraid I might disappear right in front of him. Every bump in the road sent a fresh wave of pain shooting from my hip, crashing into me, like a wave beating against rock, sharp enough to make my vision flicker. But even through all that pain, I saw something on my son's face I had never seen before. Not even when he was a scared little boy. Panic. Real bone-deep panic. And strangely, it didn't comfort me. If anything, it showed me more clearly just how far apart we'd grown, not overnight, not over weeks, but across an entire lifetime. When we reached the hospital, they rushed me into the ER. Bright white lights flooded my eyes, everything turning blurry at the edges. I heard doctors asking me questions, but I couldn't answer. The pain rose like a tidal wave, hot and choking. Someone slid a needle into my arm, and then the world softened, blurred, faded to black.
Schocken.
When I opened my eyes again, I was in a recovery room. Marcus was sitting beside my bed, his eyes red, his chin rough with stubble, like he hadn't left my side for hours. When he saw me wake, he leaned forward, voice cracked and small. Mama, can you hear me? I wanted to nod, but I was afraid the pain would strike again, so I blinked. He jumped up and pressed the nurse's button. A doctor came in, checked my vitals, examined my hip, then spoke in a calm, gentle tone. You've had surgery to place a stabilizing rod in your hip. Everything went well, but you'll need time, a long time to heal. I didn't answer. I couldn't, my strength was spent. But Marcus's expression changed as he watched me, guilt settling over him like a heavy coat he couldn't shrug off. Then he whispered the apology I had waited months to hear, but now it sounded like an echo from somewhere far away. Mama, I was wrong. All of it, I can't defend myself. Nothing I let you go through, no son should ever do that to his mother. I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I looked at his face, the same face Samuel and I had loved since the day he was born, now carrying regret, shame, and the weight of every bad choice he had made. But I couldn't tell him I forgave him. Not yet. All I could feel was the heaviness in my chest loosening. Just a little, but not disappearing. He swallowed hard and spoke again, voice breaking. Ayana. They arrested her. She's being charged with assault and causing bodily harm. I'm filing for divorce. I have to do what's right, even if it's late. I turned toward the window. The dim moon hung above the gray sky, cold and distant. What I felt wasn't satisfaction, wasn't triumph. It was emptiness, because I knew none of this would have happened if Marcus had stood up for me in the first place. I looked back at him, forcing my lips to part, my voice thin as a thread. You let things go too far. Marcus lowered his head like the words themselves were punishment. I know he whispered, but I promise I'll fix this. I'll take care of you. I won't leave you alone again. And for the first time in his voice, I heard something real. Not regret because he was caught, not fear of consequences, but the pain of finally understanding the suffering I'd swallowed for months. Still, my heart was like water after a storm. You can't expect it to settle right away. I stayed in the hospital for several days. Marcus came every single one of them, bringing food, fruit, old books I used to love. He spoke less, but his silence wasn't cold anymore. It felt careful, like someone trying to gather the shards of something they'd broken. One day he told me he'd moved into a hotel after dealing with the police. The apartment, that place. I can't go back there. I nodded, didn't praise him, didn't scold him. Healing him wasn't my job. He had his own road to walk now. That night I lay staring at the ceiling. Marcus slept on the little sofa beside my bed. I watched him breathe and wondered, was it my love that blinded me? Did I raise him into a man who could let me suffer like that? Or did Ayana chip away at him until there was nothing left? But then I realized a grown man makes his own choices. Ayana didn't lift his hands for him. She didn't speak with his mouth. She didn't let him stay silent. He had the responsibility too, to stand up, to say enough to protect the woman who raised him. 3 days later, the doctor moved me to the rehabilitation wing. I started light exercises using a walker. Every step hurt, sharp and bright, but every step took me farther away from the months of humiliation I'd endured. Marcus was always there steadying me when needed. Sometimes he apologized again until I finally turned to him and said, "Stop saying it. Show it." And he did. When I was discharged, Marcus had changed the entire apartment handrails in the bathroom, a safe shower seat, wider pathways, a new soft bed placed by the window where the morning light fell perfectly across the sheets. Gone was that dark little room Ayana shoved me into. This space felt open, warm, mine. I stood in the doorway, gripping my walker, almost breathless from the difference. "You did all this?" I asked quietly. Marcus nodded, eyes glossy. I I want you to have a place that respects you. I want to start over, Mama." I didn't answer right away. I walked into the room, let my hand glide over the new curtains, then looked out at the bright window. For the first time since I stepped into this apartment, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt alive, present, allowed to exist. One afternoon, while Marcus was making tea, he asked a question that stopped me cold, Mama. Do you think I deserve to be forgiven? I looked at him for a long time. The months of pain flashed across my mind, but so did the nights he slept in a hospital chair. The honesty he showed with the police, the changes he made without being asked. Forgiveness doesn't come in a single day, I said slowly, but you're taking the right steps, and I see that. Marcus nodded, tears gathering not from sadness, but from being given another chance. The days began to settle into a calm I never thought possible. I kept up with physical therapy, planted herbs on the balcony, read books in the warm afternoon sun. And every day I felt myself rising a little more, climbing out of the deep, dark place Ayana had shoved me toward. I didn't fall forever. I climbed back, slowly, steadily, on my own terms. And this time I wasn't climbing back just to be someone's shadow again. I was climbing into the life that finally belonged to me. 9. 6 months passed since the day I left the hospital and started over in the apartment I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Those months weren't gentle and they sure didn't fly by. They moved slow, heavy, with old aches from an injured hip, but they opened up a part of life I never imagined I'd find again at 67. I learned to walk with crutches, then to stand on one leg, then to take slow, careful steps, each one a quiet declaration that I was still here, still alive, still in control of my own future. Physical therapy always started with that tight pull from my knee, up through my hip. Some days the pain was so sharp I wanted to sit down and quit. But every time that urge came, I remembered the night Ayana shoved me to the floor. I remembered her words, "You have no rights here." I remembered Marcus looking away like he couldn't bear to acknowledge me. Those memories, painful as they were, became fuel. I didn't want my life to end in helplessness and silence. I had been silent long enough, so I kept standing, inch by inch, fighting the pain the way I had once fought the darkness that hovered over my life for far too long. Every afternoon after therapy, I'd sit on the balcony tending to the little garden Marcus helped me start. I grew tomatoes, mint, rosemary, a few tiny flowers. The smell of damp soil in the mornings reminded me of the backyard Samuel and I used to sit in, arguing playfully about whether we had space for more hibiscus. Those memories didn't tighten around my chest anymore. They softened. They felt like an old album you flip through only when your heart feels steady enough. Marcus still visited regular as a ticking clock. He always knocked first, even though I told him 100 times he didn't need to. And every visit he'd ask if I needed groceries or bulbs replaced or help with anything at all. Some days he didn't talk much. He just sat nearby while I read. But inside that silence, there was something we'd lost for a long time: presence. Genuine care. No hesitation. No indifference. I could see he wasn't trying to fix things with grand gestures. He was rebuilding slowly, through small, steady actions. And though I wasn't throwing my arms around him like those mothers in movies who forgive everything in an instant, I wasn't pushing him away either. We were meeting in the middle, a new balance we both had to learn from scratch. Then one day, Marcus arrived carrying an old cardboard box. He set it on the table and opened it in front of me. Inside were photographs I thought were lost forever. Pictures of him as a child, pictures of Samuel and me on our wedding day, snapshots of simple little picnics with sandwiches and lukewarm water. One picture showed me holding Marcus when he was 2, his tiny hands gripping my collar. Looking at them, my heart softened and ached all at once. Marcus explained he'd found the box in the basement of our old house. He'd kept the photos without telling me, and now he was giving them back, almost like stitching together the pieces of history that had been scattered. That night, as I placed the photos into a fresh album, something settled inside me. I no longer saw myself as the betrayed woman I'd been 6 months earlier. The wounds were still there, but they didn't control my entire world anymore. I was starting to see myself outside of motherhood, outside of sacrifice, outside of a past that had nearly swallowed me whole. I wasn't looking for repayment from Marcus. I didn't need him to fix my heart. I just wanted us both to be free from the things that had weighed us down, even the parts that came from me, the years of overgiving until I lost my own voice. One early March afternoon, when the trees outside were just beginning to bloom, Marcus came over with a hesitant tone in his voice. Mama, I got offered a job in Wisconsin, a manager position. But I don't want to go if you need me here. I stared at him, letting the silence settle. A part of me wanted to say, stay, don't leave me again. But that voice came from fear, not love. I had spent my whole life holding Marcus close, and the cost was losing myself in the process. I wasn't about to repeat that mistake. If it's good for your future, I said slowly, then you should go. You don't owe me anything anymore. Marcus broke down crying when he heard that. But this time I didn't cradle him the way I used to. I just placed my hand over his and said, go. We're still family. But your freedom isn't the price for proving that. 2 weeks later, he moved. Before he left, he handed me a paper with emergency numbers, his new address, even the number of a reliable neighbor near his place. I thanked him with a small smile, but inside I knew something deeper. I had stepped fully into a new chapter 1, where I didn't depend on anyone to define my life. A few months after he settled in Wisconsin, a letter arrived. The handwriting was neat, feminine. It was from Ayana. I sat with it for a long time before opening it. The letter was short, but powerful enough to keep me still for several minutes after reading it. Ayana apologized. No excuses, no blaming her past, no attempts to make herself look better. She said therapy had forced her to face herself, to confront the wounds she carried and the wounds she had inflicted on me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said that if I could finish my life without carrying the pain she caused, that alone would be more than she could ever hope for. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel forgiveness. I just felt light, as if a breeze had swept through my home and lifted the thin dust of the past. That evening, I went to the balcony to water my tomato plants. Spring air brushed against my skin, cool and gentle. City lights shimmered like a scattered sea of stars. I looked at the small green shoots pushing up through the soil, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt peace, not the kind you force yourself to feel, but the kind that rises naturally when you've finally laid your burdens down. I once lived like a shadow in my own life, but now I understand something. A shadow only exists because it's standing in the light. And I had stepped into that light not because someone pulled me up, but because I finally chose to stand on my own. After 67 years, I finally know who I am. And the most important truth of all, I am enough. I have always been enough, even on the days I felt the most invisible. Now, every morning when I open the balcony door, I look at the tomato plants standing tall almost up to my waist, and the early sunlight resting on their leaves feels like a reminder. No matter how many times something gets stepped on, as long as there's a little root left in the ground, it can rise again. And so can I. I lived a long life being a mother, a wife, the person standing behind everyone else. But here I am, almost 70 years old, finally standing inside my own story, not asking for permission and not waiting for anyone to validate me, and no longer drowning under the cruel words that used to echo inside a home I once feared. I'm not perfect, but I survived. And sometimes surviving is the victory. If you've ever been dismissed, mistreated, or lived in a home where your voice wasn't allowed to exist, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story because no one deserves to carry their pain in silence the way I once did.